Not paired here, but okay. Anyway, let's go live
Yeah.
with the channels that are live right now. So, what are we talking about this Tuesday? We have our usual Tuesday talks with iThrive team, the 4 to 5 p.m. slot, and I think last week it was you, Rusty, and Avinash. You guys spoke about careers and the burden of being a man
Being
and
a
many
man.
other things. So,
Yeah.
what are we talking about today?
So today, majorly we are talking about anxiety, right? That is something which a lot of people we see with our clients as well. And also we'll be discussing about why anxiety is not always a mental issue and how it can be physical, right? That is something which not more a lot of people address and not a lot of people know about it. Okay. So I think let's get started. Uh, and it is
I'm just telling the academy students to join the live because they are sitting there
yeah.
and discussing nervous system dysregulation. I'm like,
Uh,
come and join the live and you'll hear more about. 1 minute, I'll just send a message there. All right, we are ready to go.
So
Yeah.
let's start with a very basic question. Like what is anxiety? And how do we tackle it at
So this is
iThrive?
I was
Yeah.
actually talking to a client this morning. I was having the embracing the human experience session with one of our clients, right? And I was telling her the same thing that anxiety actually is something that has been villainized because yes, like hyper anxiety is something that's definitely a problem. But if you look at anxiety, if you look at the nature of anxiety, right, what your brain is always trying to do, I mean, let's leave the anxiety word out of it. What your brain is always trying to do is ensure your safety and security in the next moment. Now, the next moment can translate to the next 1 hour, it can translate to the entire day, it can translate to the month, it can translate to the rest of your lifetime. But your brain is always projecting different scenarios in which it wants to ensure that your survival, your ability to thrive is not going to be compromised. It's design, like that's what the hardware is for. And it often uses past data to create this kind of a projection, right? Like how when we are doing our funding projections, we're looking at past data and we're saying, okay, in the future, the revenue is going to be like this. So this is how much you should invest in us. So the brain is using past data. The brain is also simultaneously reacting to the present situation. So if it's too warm, if it's too hot, if it feels like it's going to rain and it's going to flood in Pune. So it's using real time information, it's using information from the past, and it's creating a scenario for you for the future so that you can figure out solutions for it. This is what the brain is doing.
Right.
If the brain does too much of this, that's been labeled as anxiety in today's times,
And then
right?
it becomes a pattern, right? I think like
Yeah. So
if one
anxiety
yeah,
is nothing but thinking about the future with a hint of fear, right? Like projecting for the future is a very natural phenomena.
mhm,
When you say that you have anxiety patterns or when you're anxious, basically you're afraid, and that fear of the future is what gets labeled as anxiety, right?
right.
So the question is really whether you should stop thinking about the future or whether you should like understand what is creating the fear, because that fear based pattern is really of no use. So I hope that answered your question, but that's
Yeah.
so far what I've understood about anxiety, right? Like from my own self, from the clients we work with so far. What's your take? Do you think it makes sense?
Definitely, and it's more deep rooted. Like we try to work on a lot of other things, but until unless the client is willingly able to address that stuff or that deepest shadow or that fears, we cannot do much, right? I think we cannot work on their patterns and help them resolving it and coming out of it.
Right.
So cool. So that's one perspective of it. But besides that, what other root causes do we see in even our blood
Huh.
work?
So root causes for the fear itself. So anxiety is like overthinking about the future and being
Right.
afraid of what can happen and then creating these worst case scenarios. Like I'll imagine really like even I sometimes have that pattern, right? Like if a flight gets delayed, if someone doesn't answer the phone or something like that, I'll my brain will like immediately create a worst case scenario. Now, why should my brain do that? I also don't know. Like I know now, but even then,
Right.
so the root causes one can be like if you just look at the mind, it could be trauma from the past. It can be the way you were brought up, the conditioning, the belief systems, all of that framework could be there in the mind, which could be triggering this. But what And we've seen this with our work, no, Suyash, that sometimes it could also be something as
Yeah,
simple as a deficiency, right? Like not enough
right.
magnesium, and the brain can't close these loops, right? Like all the nutrients that are required for making the neurotransmitter so that a loop can be closed and like there could be a sense of calm, that's missing. So deficiencies can do that, genetic mutations can do that. We've seen people with the
Right.
MTHFR.
Temperature gene.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. For the viewers who are watching this for the first time, what is the MTHFR gene, Suyash?
So ideally, that's a genetic mutation of a gene called as MTHFR gene, and it helps with the process of methylation. Right. So methylation plays a lot of different important roles in the body. It helps with your neurocognitive health. It helps with the detoxification pathways. It helps with the calming you down. It helps with a good neurotransmitter health. Besides, it also has a lot of different roles. So to do that, there is a gene responsible for that. And if there's any kind of mutation in that gene, definitely there can be an impairment and there can be a demand of a lot of other different nutrients which we need to address in our blood as well. So
So, yeah.
yeah, and I also wanted to talk about this morning. I was taking a look on certain drugs. How drugs side effects can cause anxiety. I think you talk about this in one of the videos, older videos as well. I don't remember. So
So
yeah,
drugs
you can.
can do this because see, the thing is anything that interferes with your nervous system, right, can trigger loops of anxiety. So your nervous system is getting dysregulated. It can't make
Right.
sense of what information is coming at it. Something as simple as a dolo to things like all these antihistamines, no, cetirizines, steroids, so we won't even talk because steroids are actually
Right.
going and directly impacting your adrenals. But even cetirizine, dolo, all of these over-the-counter drugs that people take, the antibiotics, and we'll talk of the gut microbiome and anxiety separately and how
Yes.
antibiotics can impact that. But any drug that you're taking for a symptom, allopathic drug, sometimes, and again, we'll talk of like gut microbiome, allopathy, even using herbal supplements and how that can impact the mind. But any drug that you're taking can go and dysregulate your nervous system, which in turn then will start creating these thought patterns where your brain is really not making sense. And so one is that, right? Like deficiencies, drugs, toxins, because, and I think Aditya teaches this in the academy also. We've seen
Right.
this as well, right? We've seen this with actually some cases with our clients where, in the first couple of months where they were very, very like hyper anxious, hyper vigilant, sometimes like right to the edge of conflict with the team. Once they experience a detox and the body actually clears off the toxins, they really become another version of themselves, right? So, how do you also taught the toxins chapter, no, Suyash, for a while?
Yeah.
How do
So
toxins really impact the mind? How do they create anxiety?
So exactly they do is they create certain kind of toxins. When there is in blood, right? So that whole blood is going to different organs as well as in your brain, right? So what it does is it blocks the signal pathways of the neurons. Okay, and
Hmm.
hence there is no communication happens between neurons and neurotransmitter dysregulation start to happen at very very basic foundational stage. That's where we also see with a lot of people who whom when we start to do detox, right? Even with the clients, they get a good clarity of thoughts. They are more
Yeah, yeah.
visionary, and they say more omnipotent and more clarity of thoughts was there, and they're more organized as well, right? So I think that's one of the ways for sure. That's how
Yeah,
it
because
impacts.
see, toxins, whether they are toxins that are coming in from your personal care products, like all of these
Right.
xenoestrogens, like makeup and the creams and the shampoos, these toxins are entering your bloodstream also. Or whether they're toxins that are coming from household care products, which is like your Lysol and Harpic, or actual toxins coming from food, which is now food that's not organically grown, so pesticides, fertilizers. And then another layer is like even if you're eating organic food, but if there are lots of oxalates, if there are a lot of
Mm,
anti-nutrients, if there are a lot of lectins, that's again a kind of toxins that your
right.
body will have to deal with. And then like if your mold, like if your food had
Exactly.
mold,
I was just about to talk
yeah,
about.
then you're getting these mold mycotoxins also in your body. So, irrespective of the source, most toxins actually, like Suyash said, interfere with the brain communication, with the signaling itself between neurotransmitters. Also, at a cellular level, they create a lot of oxidative stress, right? So, the
Right.
body
Right.
cells are itself dying, right? Like at a mitochondrial level, energy is not being created. Then your body starts like using fat to kind of store these toxins. Now that fat itself will start creating more inflammation, because like excess fat is inflammatory in nature. It's tissue that will create more inflammation, right? So inside your body also, forget about the brain cells, but inside your body also there's like a war going on to just deal with these toxins. Now imagine living in a war situation, you're not going to be at your most meditative calm space. You are going to be irritable and cranky and afraid and like just trying to just get through it. So that's literally what happens to us, like our minds, when our bodies are assaulted by toxins. And I think it's the same with infections, right? Because any kind of infection, like look at anyone in the first couple of days of virals, right? Like when they get a flu, how the mind itself changes, right?
Yeah, totally. Like you are not in state of thinking itself, right? You just want to shut down and lay, and then just eat some whatever you feel like, and then do just not like nothing almost. So definitely that happens. And so now
So
coming
I think we
to,
spoke of deficiencies. So
yeah,
you asked me now, what do I think are the root causes? So deficiencies for sure, toxins,
toxins.
pathogens like infections of any sort can create a sense of anxiety and dread in a person. And then again, like if there's inflammation, na, like organ level dysfunction, that also can create anxiety, right? Like we've seen, especially with hyperthyroid cases, specifically with hyperthyroid, the behavior of people with our hyperthyroidism is that like extreme anxious behavior.
Right.
So if you have organ dysfunction also, that can happen.
And
What was it? Yeah.
how about addictions? Just wanted to bring that picture as well. Like let's say someone is addicted to whether coffee, smoking, alcohol. Can that also really impact or create those patterns so that
Yeah,
going
yeah,
to
yeah.
again and start that stage, and then
See,
you just
what happens with anxiety is often, I mean, what happens with addictions is most of them are often coping mechanisms. Now,
right.
smoking and alcohol. So, alcohol is a numbing mechanism. Smoking actually increases dopamine. So, people who are like feeling a little demotivated, like lack of inspiration, they go have a smoke and suddenly they feel like, oh, they can do all the work. That's because cigarettes, I think, nicotine, especially when it's smoked, increases dopamine levels from baseline by 2 times or something. 1.5 or 2 times? 2 times. Anyway, so people are using that, right, to, as a coping, as a compensatory mechanism. Coffee, a lot of people use because their adrenals are dysfunctional, they don't have energy in the morning, and then coffee.
Right.
Now, coffee overstimulates the adrenals. Like so many people who I know, they drink coffee, and the hyperstimulation that happens to the adrenals itself triggers anxiety, right? Like they start becoming more jittery, they start just becoming a little more, so they lose that sense of serenity and calm. With the other two addictions, alcohol, which is used for numbing, and like nicotine, which is used for, like getting a dopamine hit, apart from just like the fact that nicotine addiction is very hard to beat. With these two, if people try to get off the addictive substance, right, the body is actually so used to it, physiologically it's so used to it, that the cravings hit again, and then trying to control and like trying to go through the withdrawal process itself can trigger more anxiety, because life will seem like there's no purpose to exist only. They'll
Right.
just be like they don't want to live anymore. So addictions can actually trigger a lot of anxiety, not in the moment of consuming the addictive substance, but in the moment when the body is depleted of the addictive substance. That's when the anxiety kicks in. Except for coffee. Coffee, the anxiety kicks in after drinking it.
Hmm. Cool. And some form of anxiety is a healthy response towards a stressor as well, right? So anxiety is not always a bad, right? Like
No,
it's
that's
not.
what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
yeah.
See, everything is getting categorized as anxiety in today's world, right? But it's a survival mechanism. Our
That's
brains, our lives, we could survive as a species because our brains could like imagine where our hunter gatherer ancestors went hunting in the forest, and like at one time there was a tiger at some,
mm,
here in India, no tigers are possible. Yeah. So yeah, one time there was a tiger somewhere. Now that was a shock, right? That was a stressor. Like no one
right.
expected to see a tiger when they were hunting for a deer. But they did, like they fought it with it or ran away from it, whatever, and then they went to their caves, and over the bonfire they sat and laughed about how everyone reacted, and then do cave paintings, and they relaxed. Okay, so their adrenal mechanism kind of dealt with it. Now, if their brains completely forgot about that incident, there were very high likelihood that they would have gone back to the same spot and maybe then gotten eaten. right? But the next morning, like I don't know any of them right now in like alive, but I'm assuming that this is what happened.
Right.
That the next morning they knew collectively that let's not go here because there's a risk of getting eaten,
Getting
right? So their brain used past information in real time environment and made a decision based on that about their future. So it protected them, it saved their lives, and then they had children, and their children became like our great 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 ancestors, and then we were born at some point of time, right? So it ensured survival of the species. So thinking about the future, creating different scenarios which you could follow, based on which you could make a decision, is not bad. I do it all the time, right? Like as someone who's heading iThrive, I have to look at multiple scenarios. This is literally like Doctor Strange, right? Like I don't know how many Marvel fans are watching this, but that guy sits with his time stone and he just looks at all multiple scenarios and then he picks one. So it's absolutely okay to project into the future, to think, if I do this, what happens? If I do this, what happens? If I do this, what happens? And pick a path that seems like something that you can navigate with the kind of skills and abilities you have, even though it seems a little challenging. So it is healthy to be able to do that. The problem happens when fear comes in and when decision paralysis happens. So a lot
when you
of
don't
people
know how to cope up with it, right?
how to cope or how to proceed.
Proceed.
Like
Right.
the looping thoughts come in all different ways, and then people don't know how to reject some of those and how to say, okay, this particular line of sight or this particular action item is what I'm going to pick up and follow and go on that path, no matter how stressful or challenging it might be, right? So that decision paralysis that happens is what really is really the bad part about like what people call as anxiety.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was more of a simple terminology, for people who are seeing that. And now coming to its diagnosis, right? A lot of time, what happens is in medical community, they label it you as anxiety and put it on drugs, right? So
Mm.
actually, what are some real tests, or are there any special tests to diagnose anxiety? That is what also I wanted to know, and especially.
So I've often asked our clients also this, right? Like, how do see people who come to us for the work that Avinash and I are doing around the mind and the soul and everything? People have usually gone to therapists, have already been diagnosed
Right.
with something, have already been put on medication for it, and then they've realized that like it's like how somebody comes to us for like actual physical health, their diabetes or weight loss or high BP or whatever. They've gotten the diagnosis, they've gone to like conventional medicine, doctor said take telma or metformin or
Right.
start dieting to lose weight, and they've realized this doesn't make sense, let me find someone else who's making sense. They've come to iThrive and we've like given their life back to them. It's the same when people come to us for their mental health issues, and I've often asked like, how did the doctor diagnose you with anxiety? What was the criteria? Because we've seen with physical health blood tests, so no one is able to read. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm very curious about the process. Like, how did someone diagnose you with a mental health issue? And they'll be like, I went like in the first session, we spoke, they asked me some standard questions, and based on those questions they kind of they checked my heart rate and they just checked my weight, and they just told me like, because like the way the person is narrating, na, like this happened, that happened, and like I'm stuck in this, they just said, okay, you have anxiety issues, and then immediately put the anxiety and anti-anxiety
And
prescription. I still don't know if there's a test that someone can perform.
right.
Maybe I've not like gone and looked for it. Maybe there is something that I'm not yet aware of, or like you also been looking at this, right?
Same. That's what. So I also did, got to know about any specific test for its diagnosis. Cool.
There
So
is like there is no test. There are different scales, right? Like people will say, okay, trouble sleeping, nervousness, or rapid heartbeat, or frequent urination. So if you look at all of these, rapid heartbeat, frequent urination, trouble sleeping, restlessness, nervousness, these are all the stress response that is
yes,
activated in the
yes.
presence of a threat. This is what happens when your HPA axis gets activated and a stress response has been mounted. This is like these are the classic signs, humans, animals, everywhere.
Yeah, when your
Now,
the nervous system is active and super
yeah,
active
so
in
your
the
nervous system is like it's gone out of regulation, it's overactive for whatever reasons. if you as a practitioner can't look at the reasons what is causing the nervous system dysregulation, and then you're just saying, oh, you have your nervous system dysregulation is basically category A, here are the pills to kind of
So basically
numb your nervous
suppressing all
system.
that
Yeah.
stuff, right?
So I mean, I was trying to read the DSM-5 and all, which is a textbook these psychologists, psychiatrists use to prescribe medicine. So everything there is like basically just different nervous system dysregulation mechanism described and said as a disease. So there is no test that I yet found. There are just different scales, and like I don't know, maybe they're learning it in college. But thankfully, since we didn't go formally and learn about psychology, we can
Yeah,
actually make an impact in people's lives.
exactly. Cool. So now this was a main like part of it from mental perspective. Now I also wanted to know that how can anxiety cause physical symptoms or issues, because that's a main topic today which we wanted to
Yeah.
discuss. So if you can just share any of those examples of that.
So that's what now see mental, like in the mind, you might have trauma and everything, and your brain is
Right.
trying to create a projection. It can't create a secure future for you because it can't see a way out of the situation that you're in. Something as simple as a toxic workplace environment. Now your financial stability is dependent on a job, but the workplace is really toxic. You have to work 16, 18 hours. Your colleagues are like political, and bosses are screaming, and like weird shit is
Right.
happening. So your brain is trying to look for a way out of this environment in which it feels threatened, but it can't because of conditioning and belief system. Like you think you can't get a job anywhere else, the market is down, whatever that we won't go into. What that starts creating is it can actually dysregulate the nervous system in two ways. One is it can put the nervous system in a permanently on mode, which is these states of hypervigilance, hyperarousal, where you're like always on, like you're looking, scanning the environment. So you'll have like rapid heartbeat, you'll be doing a lot of shallow breaths, you'll have digestive
Jittery,
issues. Sorry?
jittery,
Jittery,
more
you'll
of
be
yeah,
jittery. You'll
right.
have like sweaty palms. Um, you'll have like digestive issues where you're having a lot of bowel movements because that's like the
Yeah.
fast evacuation is happening. Your BP might go up. You might have
Mm.
high blood pressure. You might have elevated blood sugar levels also because
Mm.
cortisol is
Cortisol.
actually, yeah, it's going to increase glucose release in the bloodstream, and it activates that entire cycle, right? So physically you might actually have diseases like diabetes, high BP. You might end up gaining weight because to calm your system down and to numb it little, you might actually eat food. So every time you eat food when you're feeling like this, there's a sense of grounding. It really happens. You
Right.
feel a little shant, right? So you might be overeating because of that. So you might end up gaining weight. Because your neurotransmitters are getting depleted so fast, you might need sugar to kind of keep doing the dopamine cycle. So physically, what and all will happen? Of course, like if none of the health issues are happening, like diseases are not happening, you'll still be this very jittery person. You remember we'd seen someone, I don't know where that was, and this person was always darting and looking, checking. Like his eyes were always. Someone had visited office. I can't remember who it was.
Okay.
And like it was literally like scanning. Like his eyes were always scanning, and I just wanted to like hold him and say like, what scared you so much in life, right? Like just this is like really a nice gentle kind of a place. But yeah, so those are the one set of physical symptoms. The other set of physical symptoms is when the anxiety gets overwhelming, someone can actually go shut down completely, right? Let me just share a slide because I think visually also it might I'll
Yeah.
just share one of my academic slides here. um okay, 1 minute. I should have already opened this and kept, no? But I didn't know I was going to talk about this.
That's okay. You can do now.
Okay. Okay. But basically, what I want to show is the nervous system itself, how it. There I found it. Hold on. Let me just share my screen. Okay. So basically, even in like in that expression of anxiety, it can either be this hyper.
Mm.
kind of a state, or if someone has actually been anxious for, like, that state of not knowing what is going to happen in the future, that state of like just being very uncertain about the future. If it has gone on for too long, it kind of depletes the system and someone can get stuck in the off mode, where then they are actually having low blood pressure, really slow digestion. They could have actually chronic fatigue syndrome, they could have random pains, and just like no energy, absolute lack of energy. All of this can happen. So anxiety is not just someone who's always hyper and aggressive all the time. Anxiety, long term anxiety, anxious patterns can even cause these kind of physical changes in the body. I hope that answered your
Yeah, yeah,
question.
definitely. It sorted out our
Yeah.
principal language. So now, for someone who is listening our live today, let's say if someone has anxiety issues, and
Hmm.
what are some signs where they need to see that, okay, now it's the time to treat my anxiety issue, or are there any kind of signs, symptoms which someone needs to be aware of, needs to look in themselves, to see that how
Yeah,
they improve.
that's a really great question, right? Because see, when it comes to physical health issues, at least people will like see, okay, there's a physical problem and let me go do
Right,
something about it. Mental health, there's so much stigma. I was watching something today. So this guy is telling another guy, your bone is broken, it's jutting out of your leg. Why aren't you going to a doctor? And that guy is like, no, but I'll manage. I don't need a doctor, right? So it was an analogy of how mental health issues are.
right.
So with uh, issues with anxiety also, it can actually get in the way of you living a good quality of life. And I think some of the things, like, right, so for example, if you're avoiding new experiences, right, like you're really really afraid of trying something new, or if you're really afraid of interacting with people, like people beyond your comfort zone, you're very very afraid of like just going and meeting a lot of new people or new experiences, that's maybe a sign that, okay, your anxiety is getting the better of you and you should do something about it. Or now you inherently logically analyze that the fears you're experiencing, they're not rational. Like if somebody like wouldn't go to the like this balcony because they would be afraid that a meteor would land into them, and they were like really anxious about me going into the balcony also. It's not a rational fear. Like, what are the chances of a meteor hitting a balcony in Baner, Pune on a random Tuesday evening? Like, very, very low chances, right? It's not a rational fear. So, there's no need to be afraid of that. So, if you're having fears like that, that are not really grounded in some degree of logic or some baseline rationality, maybe you need to seek help around it. If someone's having like chronic sleep issues, right, not like someone who drank coffee in the evening, but you just can't fall asleep without any underlying medical reasons, like you just can't sleep, you're just like sleepless every night, maybe it's time to seek help. And then the fears that you have, if they're impacting relationships, right, like unnecessarily the fear that you have is coming in the way of actually building a really good relationship with someone. Or if it's like I experienced this in like in the marriage I was in, right, like there was irrational fear that would like keep getting projected on me and I wasn't even doing anything, right, like I'm like, where is it coming from? So, and then it became real. I ended up getting out of the relationship. So maybe it was not that irrational. I don't know. Okay. Let's keep the personal out of this. But if you're often on the edge, like if you're always like thinking something's going wrong, right? So that's no way to live. You can't always be on the edge. What else? Yeah, if you can't like even getting to work starts becoming difficult, and then actually you're having physical symptoms, right, like stomach aches, migraines. Kids have this, right, like even with Loka, my daughter, had seen this, like the day she didn't want to go to school now, like maybe somebody had bullied her the previous day, something had happened, the next day they'd be like stomach aches and this is paining, that is paining. And the minute I would say like, okay, don't go to school, rest at home, all symptoms would disappear, right? So sometimes like physically she would experience those symptoms, but it was like on and off. I mean, very occasional. And if your mind is always racing, like even if you're sitting for meditation, it's impossible to just tell your mind to slow down. Like it's not possible to have no thoughts in meditation. You will always have thoughts, but there's a certain sense of slowness to them. There's a certain sense of expansiveness to those thoughts during meditation, right? But if you're sitting quiet and your brain is like continuously just racing, then it's probably that your anxiety is actually getting the better of you, and maybe you need to seek help with just someone who can unspool that brain of yours and help you just calm down. So yeah, I think those would be signs where someone should seek help.
Amazing. So
Not
these,
necessarily like a trained therapist all the time. Maybe you just talk to a friend and a loved one also, it is enough, right?
right? So basically, opening up, talking
Yeah.
about that, addressing it is what we I think we need to know do more often to
Your,
make sure that
your sincerity and
right,
authenticity in acknowledging, right? Like,
right,
even with physical health issues, unless someone comes to us saying, hey, I have this problem, we can't do anything for them.
right.
If they're in denial, like YOLO, एक ही जिंदगी है, जो खाओ ऐश करो kind of a thing, हम कहाँ से, like, what will we do na for people?
Of course, no, for sure.
But still, you have so much patience with that. I have zero tolerance. All right.
So now, like let's say, for an example, if someone comes to us, seeking help with respect to that regard, then what will be our approach? If you can just, throw some light on that, or how we will, treat or pose them. If you can just give a brief, overview of that, that will
See,
help the client.
yeah, basically, we've always maintained this, that even if it's a mental, like, even if you think you need support with your mind, your mental health, we have to start with the body. Because your mind, like, let's take a driver and a car analogy, or a house and a, like, the person inhabiting the house analogy, right? So if you have a car and you want to be the most skilled driver, you want to be like very very at a very good pace on the roads, you don't want to cause any kind of traffic jams, you want to drive really well, and you want to just get trained on driving. But if you have a car that is broken, that has no petrol, that the dashboard is always blinking all these red lights, that this is not working, that is not working, the tires have no air, the steering wheel is not aligned, no matter how skilled you are as a driver, you're not going to be able to drive that car. Your complaint is, I can't go from point A to point B with grace, right? That's why you're saying, I need to be trained as a driver. But what are the chances that maybe your car only is not ready, na?
The
So
career itself.
yeah. So
Right,
first we want the body. So here in this analogy, the car is the body and the driver is the mind. So even before we start looking at your driving capabilities and driving skills, we want to check if the car is actually functional, right? Can we even teach you how to drive? Do you have a car that has fuel and four tires and a steering wheel with no alarm sounds going off? So if someone really wants to know what is it that they should do for mental health first, always check what's happening with your body, right? Because we spoke of some of the physical root causes, deficiencies, toxins, pathogens, inflammation. These could be causing all of that anxiety. The body might
right.
be broken, the machine might be broken. So you first fix that, get the energy lines flowing, get everything work. After that also, if it is still very very hard for you to drive, like you have the best car but you still can't drive, then we start working on that, then we start working on the mind. But that, like, one thing if people have to do from today without even getting blood test done is our magnesium. Like, I'm not just plugging it in, and maybe you can just talk to people about like how magnesium is important for like brain. You can talk about that now, but
Yeah.
I've seen it
So
works phenomenally.
for sure, like even magnesium plays around more than 300 roles, right, in the body and in the brain. It's very very important for neurotransmitter health, for our energy production itself, and for better sleep and various functions, right? So the moment you start taking that, the moment you start doing it, that smallest thing like that, you'll help, like you'll start to feel the difference. I'll say, like, even clients to us come and say even in next 2 to 3 days they start to feel a bit different, right? They start to sleep better, they have good clarity of thoughts. So definitely, that is for sure one thing, if someone wants to do, start from today itself, no doubt that
And,
is
like,
for sure.
really, we're not plugging in the magnesium,
Right,
right? Because iThrive's magnesium came in last year. I've been taking magnesium for from 2017. I'm telling you, it's like one nutrient that really helps the brain deal with anxiety, restlessness, inability to calm down, inability to sleep well, because it also aids in energy production. So it's giving you energy for
yes,
that. So please, guys, start having magnesium every day. It's an essential nutrient. We don't get it from food. Ancestrally, we used to get it from water, but our water is all like corporation water, and then we have to do the
Deficient.
RO because we don't want heavy metals in it. So our water is depleted, and then where are you going to get your magnesium from? Food doesn't provide enough of it, right? So please supplement with magnesium every day. That's one thing. The second thing is get your blood work done, because magnesium you can take without blood test, but there are a lot of other nutrients you could be deficient in, like B complex, vitamin D. Um, Even for your thyroid, if you're not getting enough iodine, selenium, protein, that can trigger hyperthyroid issues, and then that can cause anxiety. Um, or if you have infections, that we can find out from the CBC panel, right? So get your blood work done, and then we can see what are the underlying root causes. So that thing that you said, now what can people do? First, work on your body. Now, along with that, if someone wants to add on something else, I would say breath work really works well. But with breath work also, there's a caveat there, right? Because often when you're having an anxiety attack or a panic attack, and you try to do these, that Bhastrika pranayam and all, that might just increase the fire energy and make it even worse.
More.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have to know which kind of breath work to do for what situations. We are doing a breathwork master class. Pulkit, one of our academy students, only is taking that. So I think people can learn more there, but gentle breath work really helps deal with anxiety. Third thing is movement. And I'm not talking of going to the gym and moving, though that as a practice every day is useful. But if you're feeling anxious, it's a lot of energy in the body. Okay. Anxiety is a lot of undissipated energy, energy that should have gone into taking a decision, energy that should have gone into taking actions based on that decision. So you are not doing any of that. So because of that, there's energy buildup that's happening in the body and the brain. Now, assuming that you don't know which decision to take, you're still experiencing this energy outburst. So if you just put on some music and dance like mad, it releases that energy. Right? It really does. People will think, what is this idea? But it does. It just helps eliminate that energy. And then
All
music,
that stress build up in your body, and
yeah, it
as
just
we just
like,
shake it off, right?
yeah, you just shake it, like you just dance like mad, like not the Bollywood coordinated steps, but you just dance. It also activates the vagus nerve when you like you see how dogs do now.
Yeah, I was about to talk that it would be weird, but dogs actually do that. They the way they
Yeah,
shake it
they
off.
just
Yeah,
shake like
exactly. That's
everything.
right.
They just shake.
Yeah.
So they just shake off all of that. Like especially if you see dogs that are having this territorial conflict, now this area ke kutte and that area ke kutte, suddenly they come at a midpoint and they bark at each other. Nothing happens and they go different ways. But when they go different ways, now because I've
Right.
seen animals a lot right now on how animals regulate the nervous system. So dogs, they'll go their different paths, and all the dogs will just shake off all of that extra energy. Right? So it really helps in eliminating that. And then slow movement. So yoga, but even if you don't know formal yoga, you could just do like very slow, just sitting and like kneeling, and then just getting your forehead to touch down. It's called child's pose. It's called shashank. It's again something, if you do it very slowly, like on a count of 10, you do it, it will really calm your body down. So like basically, see how to use your body only. That's the only tool we have. We can't put drugs in to calm anxiety apart from like getting your nutrients. But learning to use your body to change that energetic state of anxiety is what really works.
That will help break that pattern.
Sorry?
That will help breaking up that pattern and the
Yeah,
feeling.
because you will learn how to self-regulate. You see how kids, right? Like when they're crying and if a parent doesn't pick them up, they'll just put their thumb in their mouth and then suck on it and calm themselves down.
Right.
So they're
Right.
self-soothing. They're learning to regulate. Not that should happen to a kid. Like parents should be there to soothe a child, but like no parent is perfect, right? And no parent is going to get parenting 100% right.
Right.
So kids will do that. They will learn to self-soothe themselves. So something like that, right? You see cats, they're like licking themselves and like calming their own body down. Humans can't do that, not as social civilized creatures. But use your body to soothe yourself, and then vagus nerve activation exercises. So there are a lot of those. I talk about it in the academy, though I can't go very deep into it because we have limited time in the academy also.
So one of the practice I would just like to share that which I used to do in my mornings thing. It's also called as murmur therapy in Ayurvedic
Okay.
Chinese medicine. So where I used to, it's just a 5 minute practice where I used to wake up and then I used to tap from my head to toe, like each
Hmm.
and every part, right? And just I try to meet that body part and then just shake it off and then see whether how it's doing, right? So that's just like tapping
So when you wake
everything.
up, is that like the first thing that you do?
Yes, yes, because that helps me get going. That helps me regulate my
Activate your body
system.
itself.
Exactly. And even like during the working hours, like let's say I'm too much stressed, feeling flow in energy, just taking a 5 minute break and then doing this tapping technique really helps me
I mean, you
in
two
get
guys
going.
have Krishna there who's there to massage everyone
Yeah,
on.
so I know that's also that's why we keep on
Your
tapping
bro
each other. I think
cohorts are like hitting each other, getting massages, stuff is happening there. So
so. Yeah, that helps
yeah,
for
but like
sure.
basically vagus nerve activation also really helps with anxiety. But see, in the end, na, these are all tools you're using. What has to be done is actually get to the root itself, right? And different things can trigger anxiety through life. Different episodes, different traumas, different instances, different people can activate something. So it's not like, oh, you learned how to deal with anxiety once at 13 years and now you're a pro for the rest of your life. Doesn't happen that way.
Cool. And now, one of the last questions which I wanted to address was that why are anxious people like impatient as well? Like they're so impatient in nature as well. So, is there anything related? Like, of course, there must be a relation, but yeah, is there direct relation towards that? Or
This I can speak with from personal experience only. I I am really impatient, right? Because I want things now. And I was analyzing why. So for me, see, anxiety basically stemming from a desire to create a secure future. Like you want your future to be safe for you. You don't want threats, you don't want random surprises, you don't want attacks coming in the way. You just want to feel like, okay, I'm here to do XYZ things and I can do that properly. Now, for people, so impatience is not always a hallmark of every anxious person, but for people who can actually get to the decision making point, okay, this is the path I want to follow and this is what is going to ensure like safety of my growth and my future, then they want to get to that point really quickly, because that from present moment to that future where they think it's going to be great, that time itself also can create more insecurity, more anxiety. So that's why they become impatient कि अभी हो जाएगा तो अच्छा रहेगा, then I don't have to mull over it, right? Then it's done. Like whatever line of sight I had, whatever future timeline I saw, that's already been established. So I don't have to really worry about it. So that's why
so
they become impatient.
anger and outbursts can happen because of that as well. Just to like clear that stuff and just
Anger, I think, is another emotion that partners with impatience.
okay.
Because impatience is like, see, why would you get angry? You could just be personally impatient and want things to be better. But if other people are stalling, and if you're that whatever you thought, like this is how the future should be, if that future is not happening because of other things getting in the way, obstacles getting in the systemic things like FSSAI guidelines and FDA guidelines, and
Right,
if that's getting in the way, right? You have
right.
created a beautiful future. If you do XYZ things, this is where you're going to be, and then it's really great. And then other things get in the way, and then it annoys you, right? So that's where the anger comes from. Impatience always doesn't cause anger. Impatience is just this feeling is क्यों नहीं हो रहा है अभी तक.
Mhm. Cool. Great. So we like try to cover anxiety, from strictly angle. Now we do have one of the question by Manju. So she's asking, that she drinks almost 1.5 cups of coffee every day, but wants to get off it. Right? So is there any?
Manju, it's been 3 years since I've told you to sign up with iThrive. I think it's about time you sign up, and then we'll help you get off your coffee. There is no other way to get off coffee than to actually give up coffee. But to do that, you need to have other systems in place. You need to have your nutrients and electrolytes and your insulin regulation, and everything
Right.
has to happen well. Otherwise, you'll crash, right? Like you'll try to give up coffee, but that coffee is a crutch. And when you stop drinking it, you're going to crash. I'm speaking from personal experience, right? So that's why blood tests are important for us to understand why that coffee is becoming so important for you.
You'll keep falling in the trap again and
Yeah,
again,
you
right?
keep
If you're
going
not
to
doing
that
anything.
loop, right? It's an addiction like any other. And then we have another comment by Avinash.
Yes,
Almost
yes.
everyone is anxious today. We need mass level solutions awakening. Avinash, my answer to the mass level awakening is put something in the water supply. I'm not going to say what that something is. But something in the water supply and the mass level awakening that we are
It'll
so
happen.
So desperately seeking all of us at iThrive that will happen. Um, but all right, I think we
Yeah.
are cool. Thank you, Suyash. This was really fun.
Thank you so much, Mugdha, for enlightening us on all of this aspect
Okay,
and
you
for
can't
making
call
us
me
very
enlightening.
versatile.
You're like the most enlightened person there. See, you're glowing also. So much light is coming. Okay, chalo, bye.
Cool. Chalo. Bye bye.